I am glad that you're with us today. This video is about making charts and graphs inside of Q&A Executive. I want to dedicate this today to Andrew Kunteroff. There we go. We're all together here, and of course right here in the middle, most of us know Andrew, who passed away shortly after this meeting that we had in Thailand. The reason I mention it is not for nostalgia purposes or to get us all melancholy, but Andrew used to love this topic and I used to hate it. Just recently, several people have asked me about making a video on making charts and graphs, and that made me reflect back to Andrew's always encouraging, oh, I should put more charts and graphs inside of Executive. It's great. So we're going to look at whether you really want to or not. I still have my doubts, but enough people are interested in it. And also within the spirit of our training here, our spirit of our training is that everybody in SunPlus wants to learn everything they can about this software, even if they don't need it. They want to know how do things work. So let's go ahead and look at what we're talking about here. These are 4 charts and graphs that were made inside of Executive, could be made inside with your financial statement, and let's learn a little bit about them. A chart or graph here resides in, just like in Excel, resides within a worksheet at a certain location. So it's very suitable to have numbers in one part of the page and then a chart about those numbers in another. And you could see that you have lots of options here about what type of chart you have. I don't want to spend a lot of time downgrading making charts and graphs here, but you'll discover that they are pretty limited, especially if you're used to charts and graphs over in Excel. For example, a very obvious one is right here. You see this legend here belongs up here. Well, at least as far as I know, there's no way to get it up there. I mean, you might be skillful enough to do it. I was able to turn these headings sideways, these labels here sideways, so that's okay. I think the thing about the charts and graphs that I don't like so much about it, let me just get it out just to be over with, is that Excel is so much better, makes so much better graphs and charts, and you have so much more formatting control. And remember, over in Excel, you can do a summary report and have Excel graph it for you. I'm not sure what you've added by bringing it into Executive. The only possibility is that if your overall report is in Executive and you want to add a graph, well, then having one part of the report over in Excel is an aggravation. So possibly putting it here. And there's some formatting control, but not much. To speak positive about Executive graphs and why they are sort of cool, is that you can drill down on the features here. So for example, I'm right here and I want to see who makes up presidential. That's essentially a number. So I clicked presidential. You see it's a little bit weakened here, but I'm looking for the presidential 275. So here is my chart, and there's a 275, and so I can drill down on that. And the same as if I were just drilling down on a number. So I could specify, and I could drill down and capture the who. I know we don't have rich who data here, but let's just see what we get here. You see, so I'm able to drill down and see what accounts were charged to a feature on the graph. So that drill down is sort of interesting, and one reason. I think the reasons you would put graphs within an Executive report is that you have a much larger report and you want just one graph there. And you need the features of Executive, and so you force yourself into making the graph over in Executive instead of Excel, and also that you can have drill downs. That I see the logic in that. Now let's just forget whether they're a good idea or bad idea, and let's learn how to make them. Before we go into actually making them, let's take a peek at a few more. Here's the employee cost distribution by department. And these departments over here have a lot more employee costs assigned to them. And I have intentionally organized this, and I'll show you how before we're done, organized it from smallest to highest. I could have just as easily organized it by function code order or organized it alphabetically, whichever way I wanted to do it. Look at this one. Here's the monthly expenditures for the Atlantic Conference, and the data is not real cool. Our sample database is sort of weak here, but you could see the total expenditures for every month in this bar graph. Here you see the label US dollars over here. Another example, in Excel, it's very easy to turn US dollars so it reads this way instead of that way, but that you don't have that option here in graphing and executive. Here's a pie graph of the spending by department. I have never figured out what general function services is as a department. I think we ought to just call it miscellaneous or uncategorized expenses or something, but whatever. But here are expenses that never got charged to departments. You see in our sample database is huge, and then you could see it broken down by department. And then I've also intentionally ordered this smallest to largest. You wouldn't have to. You could have it organized by function code order or alphabetically as well. Then here's a nice little graph. The cost distribution in the Atlantic Conference, how much is going to personnel, how much is going to the plant, and how much is going to department. So our goal today is to take a peek at how to make these. Actually, it looks as if there's 4 things for me to teach you since I have 4 graphs, but actually that is not true. These first 3 are all constructed the exact same way. They're just a different graph. And so we'll take a look at how to construct it, and I'm a little bit torn about how to actually show this to you, whether to just show it to you how it's done and make one in front of you. I think that's what I will do. And so you'll see me struggle around a little bit more. The 2 types here is that we have a graph that is connected to a summary report, and I'll remind you what a summary report is in the video. And then we have a graph here, number 4 here, that is hooked to summary links. And I'll show you how that is made. Basically, we have 2 ways that we can make these graphs. One, hooking the graph raw data to a summary report. The other is to summary links. That's what we have to learn. What I'm going to do here is to go to a brand new page, and this will be a little bit longer than maybe ideal, but at least you can see how to make it. What we want here is a graph up here at the top of the page that shows a departmental pie graph just like this one I made over here. Let's just show you which way we're headed with this so you can see it. So I extract it, and I like this one. I like making that one. So let's remake that one in front of your very eyes here in sheet 5. Now, a lot of what I'm showing you here is style. It is not absolutely about the functioning of these graphs, but just to show you the way that I would make them. So we're coming here, and let's say that in A2 is where I want my graph. I will make this the width that I want my graph to be and the height that I want my graph to be. Now this is not absolutely necessary, but I think it's a nice sort of starting point for thinking about making a graph as doing it the way I'm showing. And to help it to look a little bit better, I'm going to try putting a boundary around my cell here. Okay, just around the outside, and we go okay, and so we have sort of inside this boundary is the graph itself. My intention is that I'm going to hide row 4 downward. All of these rows will be hidden from 4 downward, all the rows, and then all the columns over here are going to be hidden, because in my chart that I'm showing you, I don't want my data showing. So this is the way I'm going to make it so the data doesn't show. If you want the data to show, which lots of graphs you do, you want a table of the data and you want a graph of the data on the same page, well then you of course wouldn't hide it. But I'm going to come down here, and I'm intentionally coming down here into this sort of area so I can hide these columns and I can hide these rows without messing up this. So I've sort of had to get out of the way of the cells there. The columns I want to keep, and these are the columns I want to hide. So I'm coming over here to get into the right hide area, if that makes any sense. And so here I'm going to make a summary report that captures my data. Summary report. It's the same as we always make, and so it's the ledger there, account code, and I want this to be all of my expenses. Of course, you'd put exactly what you want. If you want a graph for just this year's expenses, you would put just this year as the period. I'm putting this because it will help me get the data easier. And then to make it a little bit more complex, I'm going to export out my function analysis code and name. I'm making it a little complex to enrich the example. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that. And then the base amount. Now is a decision time for us. Right now, for my class example, I wanted that pie chart to start with the small and go to the largest. And so if that's what I want, then I'll come over here and sort the data by size, by ascending order of the base amount. And so when I make my pie chart now, the pie chart is going to be based off of this. Let me just do one more thing, and we'll keep talking about that, is that I don't want any totals on my pie chart. So I've got to take off the totals there, and we go OK. And so if I extract this sheet now, you'll see what I'm talking about. I've started with my smallest and go to my largest value. That's the order my data is showing up, and so that will be the order in which it shows up on my pie chart. If I wanted it sorted alphabetically, then I would sort it alphabetically. Just to belabor the point a little bit, I could sort it alphabetically like this, put the name up there, and that would make it sort alphabetically. And so the one that starts with A would be at the top, and then you go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, all around. And then a very logical one would be to sort it by analysis code, and that would then keep all of my similar analysis codes all together. You know, like all the presidential expenses would be at one place, and treasury would be in another, departmental would be in another, and then the churches would be in another. But for my example, and I slightly like it, I will do the base amount. I'll go OK. Also, I'm not going to illustrate it to you, but while we're here, I can also come over here to extraction type and use the scaling factor here. Basically, the scaling factor is available for any summary report. I could take this and reduce the size of my numbers if it's given me too much detail in my graph. This sort of rounds it. You know, rounds the number down to thousands or to 10,000s or to 100,000s. The point is that if you're skillful with the summary report, managing your summary report that the graph is based on will give you a more desirable looking graph. And so don't forget about that part, that you can do things. For example, let's do one over here. You want your graph to have commas in it and no decimal places. And so I would set the numbers to be no decimal places and with commas. And so now on my graph, I will have commas and no decimal places. The point being, if you know how to make a summary report, you got to start with a summary report. You got to start with a summary report that has the data like you want it, because that's what the graph is going to use. And there's one little thing that we have here that we need to notice before we go right into the graph. I'm in cell C4 here, and so you can see that this is summary report 1. Okay, summary report 1 is this summary report right there. And let's take one more little peek at the data before we start making our graph. You can see in the first column of the summary report, I have the analysis code. The second column, I have the name of the department, and then the data is in the third column. Well, I want my pie slices, or my columns if I'm doing a bar chart or whatever, to have these labels right here. So the second column has the labels, and then right here, the data starts in the third row. So that the description is in the second column and the data is in the third row. And now we're ready to make our graph. So we'll come back over here to design view. Right click this thing and define criteria. Just to make sure you're clear on this, right here, if I were writing a summary link to go in this cell, I would choose summary link. And if I were writing a summary report to go in that cell, I'd write summary report. But I'm now teaching you how to make a chart right there. In the chart, we have the designer here. The first thing the chart needs is, where is your data? It's got to find the data. So this little rectangle coming down here is all about defining the data and helping the software find where did you put the data that you want to make the chart on. So if I click right here, you can see that I've got summary report right there. So I got that. And the summary report is in cell C4. And then we have data labels are in column 2. Remember, the first column has the analysis code, the second column has the data labels, and we want this software to ignore, that's column D that has the data labels, we want it to ignore the column that has the analysis codes in it. Remember, there were 3 columns. We're getting the data labels from the second. We don't want this on the graph anywhere. And then we're picking up the data from row 4 of this summary report. Remember, the first 2 or 3 rows were the header of that little table of data. Then down here is one place that we can pick out the type of chart we want. This would be a fine place for you to pick it out. Nothing wrong with picking it out here, but to help you understand all the charts that are out there better, I'm just going to leave this like that right now. And you see, my chart is 1 row high and 1 column wide, just 1 cell. If you don't want to do it the way I did, you can play with this a little bit to control it, but I like the dragging of the column width and height to pick the column exactly like I want it. Before we worry too much about the look, let's just see if we're getting any sort of graph at all. So I click OK. You see I've got something going on here, and then if I run the report, as crazy as this looks, this is not what I want, but I run this report and it looks like I am not picking up the data correct. This is just a little bit too crazy. Let's go back over here. So I double click that, and I'm going to just change this to what I want right here. We'll talk more about selecting them in a minute, but this is a pie chart. We'll go OK. And I've got an error here, and I don't mind having an error in front of you, but you see I'm not picking up the data correctly. So I would love for it to work slick, but it's much better for us to actually figure out what is going on here. What the problem is that I have the settings wrong over here. The settings wrong in this somehow. There we go. I had not carefully picked the row. It needs to be row 3. And the headings come from the second column in the table of information. So we'll come over here, and so just in case you miss it, the second column is where the headers are. Row 3 is where the data is. I had picked the wrong one, and it just confused the whole thing. So now that we're getting us something of a report that looks right, we can now talk about making it look better. Let's run it one more time and talk about the report as it now looks. It looks to me like I'm using too big of a font for my labels around here, and I need a heading up here describing what this is graphing. So let's go and put those changes into play and see what we've got. I just double clicked on that cell. In case I did that too fast, I just click right here on the cell A2, click, just like opening up any other criteria data definition thing. So let's put a label on here, and we've got the Atlanta Conference expenses by department. We can make that bold, and we go OK. Atlanta Conference expenses by department. Now we go over here to advanced. There's a lot of power here in this chart designer. Just to help you see where I am, I double clicked on the cell and came to the definition, but now I go to advanced and I open up another functionality. That's the chart designer. This screen right here is exactly the size of the chart over on my spreadsheet. So if you were to take this height here and just notice this height and that width, if I cancel out of there, that's the same as this height and this width. So it's reproduced my cell size. So if I increase it and I double click, open up the definition, then here I open the designer. You can see that this has gotten bigger. It might not show up so much on the video, but it has. All right, now here is where I wanted to show you the opportunity to pick out the graph that you want. You see, so we have 2D graphs, all of them here, and then we have 3D graphs, all of them here. It's a little bit easier, so if we pick one, like a bar graph, we can see what it's going to look like. Okay, that's not much to look at. So let's just stick with the pie graph that is our product. Over here under edit, we can edit the background. Let's choose a background. I'm not that crazy about putting a lot of colors in reports, so I'm mostly showing this to you so you can know how to do it. I'm not sure I want you to do it, but there it's giving you the background. And then we could do edit. What kind of markers do you want to use? How big of a line? Okay, I think that's what that's all about. This color is about to drive me crazy. Style, I can do percent the data values as the size. Let's see what happens if we do that. I just can't hardly stand looking at that color. The color is beautiful, but not with that red so much. So let's just get something a little bit less dramatic. So that will be the color of our graph. And when you're playing around with it, don't spend a lot of time picking out colors if you're going to print it, because as you well know, colors and printing in black and white do not make a good combination. Your report should be completely in black and white if you're going to print it, unless you've got a fancy color printer. I'm back to this idea of reducing the font size here. So that's here with the edit font. And the legend, we have two possibilities here. One is just to simply choose the font size. You see how it's changing? I can also use what they're calling scaling here, and I can drag and sort of choose what I want. And so let's go a little bit on the small side because we have a lot of labels there. And we'll close this. Now, you want to pay close attention. If your mind is drifting, come back in, because if you miss this point, then you're going to lose the whole thing. I changed the graph here in this chart designer, and now I need to save it. I believe what this is doing is saving the defaults. So the next time I take a pie chart, it's going to keep this background and this colors. It's going to keep all of that. I think the idea being so I have the same look through all of my document, and so I need to save it. So this is the part that was a real struggle for me when I was first learning it, as oh yeah, you got to save it in the chart designer to get it to take effect. Okay, so let's take a look at our chart, and we'll extract it now, and I think that's looking pretty good. That's about as close as we're going to get it. One little more design is that we'll take this, if we want to, and hide these columns. When I extract it, there's no confusing numbers out there, and I could hide these rows as well and end up with a nice little chart sitting there all by itself. For this last little demonstration here, it shows you a different sort of arrangement. Again, I'm going to place this graph as if it were the only thing on the page. The user gets the impression that it is a freestanding thing, but actually it's all going to go into cell A1 here. And I'm going to put the data down here again so I can easily hide it so it doesn't show up. Now I will mention to you that of course if you don't want to hide the data but you actually want to show it as part of your report, then of course you would put it where it can be seen. But I think that you'll follow this. Now the beauty of the summary reports that we've just finished looking at, if the accountants add a new department or a new account or a new who or whatever the summary report is breaking down the information by, the summary report will automatically pick up that new account, the new who, the new department. But the problem is that you are then sort of stuck, as far as I could tell, you're stuck with the data names that were set up when we did the account. For example, we have an account here called Public Affairs and Religious Liberty that was a little bit big for our graph, Sabbath School and Personal Ministries. We're just stuck with the dimension as it comes from the software, Sun Systems. Okay, here's a good one. Public affairs and religious liberty / legal. Well, what if you don't want that graph to be so big? You know, Sabbath school and personal ministries, you'd like to control the name for the function that is there. And so this is what we're going to do here. We're going to name the data labels over here. Just so you have a sense, we're working with cost distribution. Let's get this thing so I can type. So we're here. This is going to be our graph right here. We drop down here to the right. We can name the data fields like we want. And just to give us a sense, these are going to be expenses we're talking about here. This label I'm typing in here has nothing to do with anything. Expense breakdown. Now it counts what I'm typing here. So we would have personnel, departmental, and now I realize that what I'm saying here is not 100% accurate, but it works great for an illustration. So we have everything that starts with an 81 here, it would be a personnel expense, and everything that starts with an 82 to 89 ZZZ is a departmental expense, and for the sake of this illustration, I'm just putting everything that started with a 9 as a physical plant expense. Now I know that's not true because it has transfers, but it works for the point we're doing here. So we will do a summary link here, and we'll do ledger, account code, 81. This first row is picking up 81. And then you would, of course, build this for your accounting period. I'm going to do all of my periods since I have a limited example database. And so we like that. And we go right to this. Copy. And we paste that. We will then set these with the format that we want for our graph. And let me change this one. This will be 82 to 89 ZZZZZZ. And this would be, change this one to 9. I tell you, I feel so bad about it. Let's just put it to 98 ZZZ and leave out those transfers. I think it leaves out the transfers. Let's take a peek. The transfers are 99s. So this is all expenses. So we've left out the transfers and we go OK. So we'll extract these things. And we have these three numbers here that will serve as a basis of our pie chart. So we're sure this is working. The beauty of what we're doing here is I have control of exactly what data is being put together. I don't have to break apart the breakdown that summary report does. I also can control my labels. And so this right here is going to be our data. The first column, column D, will be our labels, and the third column will be our data. Now what we're going to do is sort of an important thing, and you may never have done this before, but it's actually very helpful. Very helpful, and use it in many contexts. I've got that range there. I'll come up here and insert a name. And so I'll name this anything I want, and so I can do expense. It has to be all one word, breakdown. There you can see the range, and so we add it, and we go OK. Now we come back up here to this, and we right click, define the criteria. Instead of a summary link or summary report, which we typically get, we'll get a chart. I will pick up the name of the data source, and you can see expense breakdown, which we just named, is there. If I hadn't named it, it wouldn't be there. I believe it's in column D, and I believe the data starts in row 1. We'll see if this doesn't work for us right here. And we don't want to do anything with that center data. And just so we have something to look at when it comes, let's do this. We are not doing any work except for making sure that it's working correctly before we do a lot of formatting work. And you can see here that we've got us a nice little graph. So what we need is a title. And just for the sake of showing you something, I will make these labels a little bit larger just for illustration purposes. So we click this and we double click on that. So we need titles, and we could call this Atlantic Conference. Expenses, we can make it bold. We can choose our font size, and we're okay. We're back to the chart. Everything is working peaceful. And we can go over here to advanced, and it looks pretty good to me. But let's get the fonts just a little bit more pronounced. They're 11 point right now. Let's get them a little bit larger, and let's make it bold. And we close that. I think we're okay. Well, that would do file. Remember, this is a step that if you don't do it, you think it's acting badly. Save. Then we go OK, and we extract. It looks pretty good. All right, and so for our last little bit of fun, we'll take these columns here and format cells, column hide, and we'll get this here. Format cells row hide. Okay, and then when we extract this, and we have just a freestanding deal. In fact, we can make it even a little bit more beautiful if we want to. We take this clear, right click, sheet properties, and if we take care, remove the row headers and footers, we go OK. It looks a little nicer. We don't have the header in there, and we can do like this, and we have it. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and it makes me think and remember old Andrew and the efforts he did to give us such an interesting life. So thank you for your watching these videos, and I will see you next time.